Good evening. Tempe Union continues to maintain social distancing for the safety of our community. The open meeting law permits a public body to hold a remote meeting through technological means and implement procedures designed to safeguard the public's access to the meeting. We are streaming this meeting live on the district's YouTube channel. I call this meeting to order at 5 o'clock p.m. May the record show that we have 5 board members present. At this time, I move approval of the adoption of the special meeting agenda. May I have a second?
A second.
Thank you so much. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you so much. And welcome to our committee members and guests. Dr. Mendeville?
Thank you, President Garcia, Vice President Barraza, and members of the board. This is kind of an exciting study session because we see the work of our wonderful committee members, and they will be introduced in just a bit. But through our board member, Montero, and Mr. McDonald and Ron Denny and the team will first be introduced. But I'm excited to the fact of what we're doing today, and that is establishing new policy for our social, emotional, and mental wellness for our school district and for our students. And it is a first, and we're excited about that. I'm most thrilled because we had such a collective effort here, and they worked very hard. And I'll tell you, the product that we're going to talk about today and that will be presented is, in my opinion, excellent work. So just before you begin, I just wanted to applaud the work that all of you put in, because I know you put in hours into this, and your thoughtfulness and your perspectives are greatly appreciated, and I want that known publicly. So with that in mind, I want to honor board member Montero and have him, I'm not sure how you structured this, you guys, but as the lead individual for the ad hoc committee, because that was the charge of the April 21st board meeting, and for the resolution that an ad hoc committee be formed, and with the sole purpose of developing policy recommendations, and that's what's happening tonight. So board member Montero, Mr. McDonald, and Mr. Denny.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Mendeville. President Garcia, fellow board members, executive team, committee members, and watching audience, I want to thank you for tuning into our meeting today. I'm super excited for the presentation that we have set up and to show the work. The work that we're going to show tonight has been, the work of several months. And before I introduce all of our committee members, I do want to give a special thank you to Mr. Ron Denny and Mr. Sean McDonald for working with me through this entire process. The countless hours that were put in to making the product that we're going to present today what it is. We spent a lot of time really researching around the state of Arizona and even across the country. And we couldn't find much on the policy related to social emotional wellness and mental health. And so, what we're presenting today will make us a leader in the state, and hopefully, make us a great example of what it means to prioritize mental health and social emotional wellness in our school districts. So before I turn it over to the rest of the committee members to present our findings, on our first slide here we've got all of our committee members that were a part of the committee. We had about 25 or 27, I forget the exact number, individuals. We had Sean McDonald, Ron Denny, our principal representative, Mr. Brian Golford, who's with us tonight. We had administration from each site put forward one student, so we had one student representative from each of our schools, some of whom are with us tonight, as well as some teacher representatives, some parent representatives, and some community partners, all of whom are listed up above. So if we could we just give them, all of those that are here, a quick round of applause for all of their hard work. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Golford.
Thank you, Mr. Montero. Board President Garcia, members, good evening. Our purpose and task was twofold with meeting. Number one, we wanted to come together in a fully comprehensive and inclusive manner to number one, review our current comprehensive policy regarding social and emotional wellness, but also after reviewing those policies, be positioned as a committee to make recommendations to the policy. And so with that being said, we wanted to bring forward a few recommendations that not only promote social and emotional wellness within our district, but also represent best practices in the current field. And so based on the committee's work and the 5 meetings that we facilitated, I would tell you that we certainly accomplished that task.
So we wanted to go ahead and just give you a brief overview of the meetings that we had and what we discussed. So on May 4th was our first meeting at Compadre, and we just did introductions, laid the groundwork for what the ad hoc committee was charged with. During that meeting, we also reviewed what our March 24th study session on social emotional wellness, just to make sure that the committee was up to speed on everything that we did. On our May 12th meeting, we started with the JL policy, working in 3 different groups. Collaborating that way, and then sharing out our ideas at the end of that meeting.
We also like to thank Member Montero for helping support this. Ron and I really do appreciate allowing this effort to allow us to do great things for our school and our sites and our students and our staff. We also on May 19th went through JL, completed that, and jumped right into the regulation JLR. And on May 26th, we were able to not only confirm JLR, but also look at JL, and it provided other recommendations that you'll see tonight. And of course, today, June 9th, we're here to present the findings to you and the recommendations.
Hi, everybody. So for JL, we just added additional language and restructured and kind of rearranged everything overall. So I'm just going to go through. In the very first section, we wanted to address the mental health, of course, and so we just added in the sentence to kind of set up the rest of the policy.
Can you tell us who you are so you get
so
that
sorry.
proper
I'm so
recognition, because we so appreciate you.
I'm Angie McDonald. I'm from ASU Home Base Initiative, and yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Angie.
And then, so in the preamble, we listed out all of the challenges that students face, just to make sure we weren't excluding anything that students are facing with mental health obstacles, and because it's just so crucial to recognize all of them. And then we also added in the stigmatized mental health is stigmatized, and we want that to be also addressed. And then the safe school environment is a part we changed around a bit. And so we wanted a section on the safe school environment, because if students feel safe in the building, it's our priority to make them feel safe. And then students will have the opportunity to use their resources and branch out and make healthy relationships if they feel safe in the school. And then cultural proficiency, we added some parts as well. And so there we just wanted to outline all aspects of the school should be all-inclusive to diverse cultures and identities. And it's important for students with that. It's important for students and their mental health that they feel included as well as their heritage. And then we added a very long part of suicide prevention, because we thought that it's a very big concern within the schools. And it needed to be a well-thought-out section to establish the protection for all students and staff and families. The staff will be trained and prepared for any encounters that regard suicide, and the resources will also be available to anyone that wants to learn more. We also wanted to state that the reentry procedure for any student that has a mental health crisis will be followed, because they really need to be supported through their hard time. And then on to health services. It was important that we added a health services because we want to make sure that students receiving they should be receiving the correct attention during school hours, and the problem needs to be identified correctly, and not just when they walk into a nurse's office, they need to be treated with the correct, whatever they're facing correctly. And then first, we added a section on staff wellness because we think it's really crucial that the staff is being represented in this as well. The staff needs to have the same mental health support as the students do, and they are modeling the healthy behaviors. And if they aren't healthy, how can we expect them to model healthy behaviors? And that is majority of what we changed and added and stuff. Yeah. The food and nutrition part, we're skipping, and yeah.
Yeah, I can provide quick clarification on that. So most of the sections we just moved around. Mr. McDonald went around and moved some of the paragraphs around to make sure that the policy read better. But majority of what we added for suicide prevention is going to be presented next with JLB.
And I want to add to the clarification of that, Board Member Montero, in that initially because this is a discussion that the thought was, let's find an existing policy. We had a student wellness policy of JL. We started there, and then the committee pretty quickly, I think, realized, oh, we probably need to do something entirely separate. And so within that discussion and work and realization is what you're going to see right now. The JL piece on student wellness, there are elements there that were not part of the charge of this committee, like with the health and nutrition and the safe school environment and things like that. So there'll be the committee under Diane Muehlman's, because this was her policy from 7 or 8 years ago that she recommended to the board at that time. We'll make those revisions and bring them back for first and second read at a later time.
Good afternoon, Governing Board and District Office and committee members. I'm Jen Leone, and I'm currently the Assistant Director of Special Education, and I am thrilled to be here alongside you guys as well as our committee who worked really hard these past few months. And so thank you, Dr. Mendoval, for giving a little of a preface to this next section, because I'm going to talk a little bit about what the committee worked on as far as the new content and new information as it relates to JLB. Which focuses on the student mental health and social emotional wellness. And so and I'm sure I speak for all of our committee members, when I was presented with the opportunity to participate in this committee, I thought to myself, there's really no better time than now, and this is wonderful. And so thank you, Governing Board Member Mr. Montero, for helping head this. This was wonderful. So our committee had a lot of rich discussion about, from various individuals from different walks of life, both professionally and personally, in which contributed to some of these new components that we're going to kind of run through. I won't read it word for word, but I'll give an overview of some of the pieces we felt were really important and relevant for not only our students and their social emotional wellness, but also as it relates to our students, families, community members, and schools. And so not only did we have professionals from various backgrounds, we had parents, we had students, we had teachers, teacher leaders, administrators, psychologists, special education representation, and so we feel really proud about this work that we did. So part of these ideas, with the first part of mental health and social emotional wellness, we definitely felt with the student mental health that there definitely needed to be an enhancement and some additions to this piece, in which we identified some critical specifics as to how to continue enhancing the school climate, safety, and learning to provide school leaders with best practices. We talked a lot about that school is not only about grades, and that's not the only important piece, but it's about the student as a whole with social emotional wellness and mental health, and fostering a healthy social emotional learning experience. And so some of these are developing strategies, curriculum, fostering peer-to-peer connections, helping. A big part of our discussion was revolving around helping students break down those barriers with it's okay to talk about some of these pieces, to get away from the stereotypes, the stigmas, and really make it okay to talk about and make them feel as such. And so a lot of these components, although it's a not exhaustive list, these are just some of the approaches and practices that the committee felt were really pertinent. And so within that JLB, although there are some components A through Q, and it probably could have been A through Z and over again, we developed and made the verbiage flexible enough to give each site some autonomy with some of these expectations and standards, but understanding that each site and campus have different physical setups and might have different student body needs. And so we gave that autonomy within each of these components on that lettered list. And so when we go through those, we really noticed that it followed a really smooth flow in how to tackle the student mental health and social emotional wellness within this policy. And so when we look at it from A through Q, it really follows a structure of educating, breaking down the barriers, having that approach of we don't just talk about it, be about it, connection and the human connection, training and informing, implementing, and then practicing, and then doing it all over again. And so that A through Q really follows that flow. And so that's why some of those are ordered even in the way that they are. The student connection and school connection was a huge part of why these components were, and these approaches were embedded, because as Andy, our committee member who spoke right before me, mentioned, students really want to feel safe, and they need to feel connected, not just to their peers, but to staff and to their campus and to that campus culture, in order to be able to have their needs met, not just academically, but socially and emotionally. And then obviously with the piece there of which I believe was kept the same with the Social, Emotional, and Wellness Committee, obviously having that being a huge ongoing piece in which we hear from our students and community members and various stakeholders as part of that committee on what the needs are as it relates to our students in social, emotional wellness, and keeping obviously Dr. Mendeville and the governing board informed of what those pieces are. And so we feel really proud because we worked really hard as a team, and as a committee, we really welcomed all input, and our students were really a big part of that committee. And so we feel this is a really awesome reflection and important piece to the puzzle here as we continue our work as Tempe Union High School District. So I will go ahead and turf it to my committee member, Morgan. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Morgan Phillips. I am the lead prevention specialist with Teen Lifeline. And I want to say how grateful I am to be able to be here today, and that Mr. McDonald and Mr. Denny invited me to be part of this committee. And I'm so proud of all of the work that we've all done today, especially this piece that includes all of the suicide prevention efforts for the district. And I do want to say that all of these guidelines and recommendations come from a place of best practices. Most of them come from SAMHSA and the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, who really are the leading experts and the places where you can very easily find all of these guidelines posted very publicly. So if you want any more information, they are absolutely all available. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions as well. Our goal for this section of the policy was really so that the district could be strategic and comprehensive in preventing suicide. And because of that, this section is definitely the longest. And that is purposeful to make sure that we do not leave anyone out. So there are pieces of this policy that are specifically about students. There are pieces specifically about staff and about families and community members. So we really wanted to be careful to make sure that everyone was included and was going to be protected by these policies. Also, in preventing suicide, we know that when we are using those evidence-based tools, we are also preventing other things as well. We are preventing other risky behaviors, we are preventing abuse and violence and all kinds of other things. So it's definitely not just about preventing suicide when we're following these kind of guidelines. But as you read through the policy, you'll see that prevention and awareness, intervention, and postvention are all included in this policy. And each one of those pieces can and maybe will be their own specific policies as well, but they are all included in this piece. And they also include making sure that the district is adhering to 2 new laws that were passed here in the last year, one of them being the Mitch-Warnock Act, and the other being the new ARS statute that mandates that districts and schools print crisis line numbers on the back of all student IDs. So we wanted to make sure that the district would be able to follow those as well within the policy. So the first little subsection of this policy is about the staff preventional development and making sure that they are following that Mitch-Warnock Act that was passed, and making sure that the staff have access to evidence-based curriculum to be able to learn the risk factors and warning signs for suicide, and to be able to know how to interact with students who are at risk for suicide, how to get them to the appropriate person on campus who can go ahead and do that intervention, and how to do all of the follow-up procedures as well. So all of that is in there, making sure that they are paying close attention to more at-risk groups like the LGBTQ community, Alaskan Native and Native American students, and other groups that we know to be more at risk for suicide. And then as you go down, you will also see that there is a section for youth suicide prevention as well, making sure that your students have access to developmentally appropriate suicide prevention and awareness materials. We really want to make sure that students at all of your campuses know that when they're worried about someone, when they have a friend who comes to them and says, I don't want to be here anymore, that student is going to know how to make sure their friend gets help and stays safe. And so that was a really important piece for us to add to make sure that the students have access to that kind of information and education. And it is the hope of this committee that that will at some point be included in their normal health class curriculum, so that they are all getting that same level of information. And of course, that this education and awareness stuff, as far as suicide prevention goes, is presented in best practice ways, making sure that they're adhering to all of those standards. And then the next section is for community education. I'm sure we can all agree that it definitely takes a village in order to keep all of these kids safe and healthy and resilient. So in addition to training staff and educating students, it's also important for the district to have those educational opportunities for parents and guardians and families and other community members as well, and making sure that the district is providing best practice education programs so that those community members and families are able to help in that effort of preventing suicide. The next section is about intervention and referral, making sure, and this kind of is part of that staff training as well, is ensuring that anytime there is a student who is showing warning signs for suicide, that they will be referred to the appropriate staff member on their campus, so that there is a best practice trained mental health professional who is going to be doing an intervention and a risk assessment with them to make sure that they are getting all of their needs met. And then there are some, A through F, who kind of go through what the guidelines for that are when a student is referred for a risk assessment or a suicide intervention. The important things being that that student is not left alone until their risk is assumed to not exist, to make sure that they are being able to stay safe during that time of crisis, and that district employed mental health professional is able to provide a full intervention and risk assessment in order to determine the needs of that student at that time, time, and then to be able to inform their parents or guardians or family members of the assessment and what came of that. The next section is postvention, and this could have been and will be much longer when it's its own policy. This is one of those things that districts and schools hope to never have to use, and we truly hope that you don't ever have to use this. But we know that in those times of loss and of grief and of crisis, this is something that you do not want to have to think about. And preparing for it in the backside is much easier than trying to scramble and figure out what is the best way to support the students in the community in those times of need. So we have outlined kind of an overview of what postvention should look like on a school campus and within a district. And again, these all come from those same SAMHSA and American Foundation for Suicide Prevention best practice models. And really it's about getting all of the relevant information before you start disseminating that information to students and staff and families, making sure that we confirm with the family of what exactly happened and what information they're willing to share and what information they'd like shared with the district and with the school, and making sure to have a crisis response team who is going to be there to manage all of these services that are going to be provided, with the important pieces of that being supporting students who were close to the person who died by suicide, and making sure that they are seen as soon as possible and that their family is communicated with, and making sure that they have all of the appropriate services that they're going to need in order to heal, and also making sure that those same services are available to all students, all staff, and all families and community members. We know that when we lose someone to suicide, that ripple effect can be very large. And as a district, we want to make sure that anyone who is suffering from that loss is getting their needs met. So making sure that we're disseminating information in a safe way so that everyone is getting the same facts, and making sure that those support services are available to everyone.
I want to just comment, if I may, that we do have, I don't want anyone to listen to this or view this and infer that we do not have a district crisis response team. So I just want to make that real clear. However, some of this material just helps us to clarify and do a better job of organizing and having best practices in place.
Absolutely, yes. The purpose of this was to make sure that roles were defined, and that everyone knew exactly what their function were to be on that crisis response team. And having policies like this can make that job a little bit easier, especially during those times of crisis. Absolutely. And then the very last section that's included in this policy is about the multi-tier system of support. And I hope that through this overview that we as a committee have given, you all can see how all of these different pieces of the policy really fit within MTSS. We're really making sure that all students receive some level of social emotional learning and support, but that as students need more services and more support, that they will get that through this policy. Thank you.
Are we allowed to ask questions, or do we have to wait till the end for everything?
Let's allow them to go through the presentation, and then we can circle back for questions.
Hi, good evening, Governing Board. My name is Wendy Howe, and I'm with Raising Special Kids. We are the Parent Training and Information Center for the state of Arizona. I want to say a very personal thank you so much, specifically to Mr. Denny and to Governing Board Member Montero for inviting us as community members to be a part of this very important committee. I'd also like to echo Member Montero's statement of being one of the first to really be able to dive into this very important issue and make sure that not only the students, but the staff, the parents and families are taken care of, specifically with regards to social emotional wellness. It's a very important piece, and I'm so glad to be a part of this with Tempe Union High School. So thanks so much. After reviewing the intense amount that we've added into or requested to add into policy JL and then JLB, we've added onto JLBR. And I wanted to talk briefly about the pieces that you are probably very familiar with already, but we're making sure is in this policy. And that's with our multi-tiered system of support systems. So MTSS is something that can work very well, obviously, for social emotional wellness issues and mental support. So we wanted to make sure that this was outlined specifically here in this policy. And I'd just like to run through the first part and the tiers, and then my friend Sadie is going to finish up with tier 2 and tier 3. So MTSS includes 3 different tiers of strategies and research-based interventions for service delivery. It's a problem-solving method, okay? And specifically, as we move into looking at the 3 different tiers, there's a number of individuals that are involved in making sure all of these steps and all of these tier levels are adhered to appropriately. They can be a part of school nurses, psychologists, parent liaisons, principals, deans, a number of individuals that are outlined at the site levels. Specifically for delivery of MTSS, it has 6 core components that are listed there. I won't read them all to you. However, they're very important and all need to be adhered to for proper delivery for MTSS. As we move into tier 1, a few things that I just wanted to highlight that I feel like are really important for us to make sure that we see that are on here. Tier 1 is your delivery for all students. Assuming all students need to have this information, it's critical that we deliver it in a way that is appropriate and has it be available for the students to accept and to hear. Few things I just want to highlight in developing and implementing social emotional learning strategies. We can do that across the curriculum in entire school environments, or we can do it even in smaller groups. And depending on how this particular delivery is put out, then it will be done through that way. Fostering peer-to-peer connections is something that's really important as well. Oftentimes, kids will talk to their co-students, and to be able to get that information onto the appropriate adults is a part of that as well. Modeling and promoting positive interpersonal and professional relationships among teachers, staff, and students. Students aren't going to talk to the teachers unless they have a relationship with them. And fostering that important relationship is something that's very critical at all levels. Encouraging quality, sustained involvement, engagement of family, community members in the school. Helping the parents understand what they can do to help and support everything that's being taught here at school, to be able to provide those learning opportunities for them so that they're being the best parents that they can be at home with their children. And then utilizing trauma-informed practices aimed at helping our students feel safe, connected, and equipped to learn. When students feel safe and well taken care of, that's a part of how they can achieve their academic success. Thanks so much.
Good evening, all. My name is Sadie Goldman, and I am the student representative from Mountain Point. And I just want to start out by giving a huge thank you to Mr. Denny, Mr. McDonald, and Board Member Montero for this huge honor. I'm so thrilled to be here as a student and in front of all of you. It feels so professional, and I'm so happy to be here. So thank you for having me. So I am going to present Tier 2 and Tier 3. So Tier 2 just further elaborates off of Tier 1, and it explains that if a student is in need of more support, that they are able to get it. So it kind of explains that if a student is falling behind academically or they're not meeting the requirements for their grade level, this tier is specific to them. So some key points are that we want to ensure that every student reaches their full potential and it feels safe in doing so, and that they have the support they need from professionals in their environment. And then we want to use referral mechanisms for an effective use of intervention services. So the student academic and emotional needs can be met. And then I really want to emphasize points D and E because it explains the adult advocate. And that's something that a lot of students need, and I know that that's something that I could personally benefit from in starting those difficult conversations, because that is the starting point of having vulnerable conversations and experiences. So kind of sharing, having those teachers and adults in the schools share their personal lived experiences can really help students connect and grow personally and academically. And then point E is important because it connects students and families with community mental health professionals and then also those in the school. And then F kind of explains that every student's need needs to be met, no matter what they're going through. And it just allows them to grow academically and in their personal development. So this is a really important tier because it shows how essential it is to have a safe and healthy school environment so students can learn effectively. And then tier 3 it's a short one, but it explains the intervention that needs to be taken and those steps to be taken in the community for students who have had insufficient response to tiers 1 and 2. So this really focuses on community intervention and how critical it is for students to feel safe in the school and for the safety of others around them. Because like Morgan said, there is a ripple effect and it's important to reach all students, even if they're not included in this tier 3. So thank you so much.
And I just want to really quickly add on, because I know the MTSS piece is one that Dr. Mendeville is very passionate about and has made, to really integrate the social emotional piece. And I know we've really utilized that, especially this year with the academic piece with the pandemic, but really being able to focus now on the social emotional piece and also how that goes hand in hand with the academic piece. And so I also just wanted to hand it over to him to see if he had any words on the MTSS piece as well.
Simply, thank you. And Sadie, we're so proud of you. You did an awesome job. I love it.
Hello, my name is Erica Braun. I am a student representative from Desert Vista High School, and I want to start off as well by just thanking you all, especially throughout my work in this committee. I truly felt heard, and that really what made a profound impact on me, and I'm just truly honored to be here to represent Desert Vista High School and students just all throughout Tempe Union High School District. And I will be presenting, separate from JL, JLR, and JBLR, some more recommendations to the board. So to start, I would like to recommend expanding the mental health clubs to all campuses to help foster those peer-to-peer connections and bring awareness. So at my school, we do have a Bring Change to Mind club. I know a couple of other schools have it as well. They help to start those conversations, and it creates a safe environment for students to feel heard. And we begin to have those conversations to start to destigmatize mental health, which is truly so important right now. Next, we want to expand the peer tutoring programs district-wide, similar to that of Desert Vista High School. So at my high school, I'm part of the peer tutoring program, and I can safely say that it is truly a safe environment for students to come and get help and support from other students. So it just feels a lot more safer to them, I believe. So yeah, I think it'll be really beneficial to a lot of students to implement that district-wide. Next, we want to incorporate ongoing staff mental health and wellness initiatives, as well as a separate staff wellness policy, because we do want to highlight how important it is to prioritize staff mental well-being as well, because if they aren't able to function at their best ability, then it may be difficult for them to support students. And then we would like to offer social emotional wellness, education to families both virtually and in person, to continue having these important discussions and conversations. And it's really, really important to continue to educate students so that they can maybe like recognize some of these issues within themselves. I know a lot of people may just push that aside, and that can create some turmoil within themselves. And just to continue educating staff, teachers, and other students so that they can take those initiatives to start healing. And then we would like to make the presentations available on district websites as well, just to create greater transparency and visibility. And then lastly, we would like to institute mental health policy and protocol that specifically delineates how students will be identified, assessed, and when applicable, will receive appropriate intervention services. Just so that if a student does want to go get that support, they know what to expect. A lot of students may turn this down because they are in fear of what may happen after, or if they will come into some type of trouble. So just making sure that students feel comfortable enough to know what type of action will come after will create a greater sense of comfort so that they can take those steps to start healing themselves. Thank you once again, and I'm gonna pass it to Amanda.
Now, I believe your sister from Desert Vista would be very proud of you, Erica, but you stand strongly on your own. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amanda Steele. I am a parent and very grateful for Armando Montero, Sean McDonald, and Ron Denny for allowing me to be part of this committee. So I have a son who has been in this district for 7 years. He is currently at the Success University program after he just graduated from Mountain Point this last year. And so having a student with an intellectual disability is a challenge when there's not always opportunities for them to have these social emotional supports. So when I reached out to the board and let them know my concerns, within less than 24 hours, Armando Montero called me and invited me to be a part of this committee. So I thank you for that. It has been an honor working with all of these committee members. It was a beautifully diverse group that was put together to make sure that everybody had a say, and so thank you for that. Thank you very much. I am going to provide the additional recommendations from Part 3, starting with changing the job description of support counselors to better fit the needed role on each individual campus. We'd also like to see ensure all students are required to take health classes before graduation. Updating that health curriculum with more robust social emotional wellness components and discussion awareness. I was a big part of why that was put in there because currently not all students are receiving a health curriculum that is robust and truly beneficial for their health needs. So, and they are receiving credit for that without getting that. So I'd like to see that updated. Well, we all would. We'd like to have you revise the student handbook to add mental health language and support services in there, requiring schools to review these changes with students at the start of each school year and offering different models of modes of learning opportunities such as videos for each campus related to those mental health to complement the discussion that's going to be had. We'd like to see you connect and coordinate with Tempe Elementary and Kyrene School District to coordinate this policy efforts and PR campaign to reduce the stigma around mental health. It starts early, it starts young, and it needs to be a tiered approach altogether. And we'd like to see a tiered staff development related to mental health and social emotional wellness to reduce repetition. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for presenting on this very, very important policy and additional recommendations. And thank you to everyone who has had a hand in this. A lot of work, a lot of time, many months. But before we pass it on to questions, I want to wrap it up with Member Montero to see if you have any finishing thoughts or comments before we move into questions.
Here, I can hold off if there's any questions, but after that I'll finish up.
Okay, sounds great. All right, we'll start with Member Hodge.
Okay, sorry. First off, I just want to thank everybody in the committee for all the work you've been doing. This has been something that's been long overdue. I remember when Board Member Montero came to me when he was maybe a freshman or sophomore and talked about this. So I am very proud and honored to be sitting next to you and see this dream that you had come forth. So thank you. Also, I can't not stop speaking without saying hi to one of my favorite people in the world, Lori Warnock over here. So I just wanted to say hi. I just have a question for the committee. When we go back into the staff professional development, and you start to name off like the youth that's, that seems to be more, like suicidal prevention, that you have to look for the gear towards it. And I get into it, when I look at it, I see foster care, incarcerated youth, homelessness, and I see American Indian / Alaskan Native students. I just want to ask you a question. With everything in the climate today, is it fair just to say one? Because right now, the Asian community is having a lot of suicides. I think we need to reword that, because that really kind of isolates everybody else out of it. What about the Black Lives Matter when something happens, or any of that? I think that we need to change that, because that's only bringing out one. So I really think that that should be something that we reword, because it needs to encompass every community. Because every community has a pocket where there's a problem or issue in society right now. So that's where my recommendation would be on that, because I don't think that it should be exclusive to say just one.
Yeah, Member Hodge, if I may, I was not part of the robust interactions and conversations within the committee, but from a perspective of recognizing that, yes, all of our students are important and matter, and it's critical that we do incorporate into everything that we do. With respect to American Indian and Alaskan Native students, this actually is something that dates back to the founding of the country and having a government-to-government responsibility, that requiring tribes and governments at every level to consult with each respective government. So while it is not a who is the most vulnerable, it is because we have a special duty and special relationship with our tribal nations that we are required to work with them, which is why it's part in what we do. But I do want to recognize that it is important that we recognize all of our students.
I think we need to put something in there for all of them then.
But I just want to provide that context, because that is something that has been incorporated back to the founding of our Constitution.
And I get that, but I think if we're going to add that, we need to also put something about the rest of it in there, and as a contraction too, because it's as if I'm a Black parent, or I'm a Black child, or a Asian child, I would feel like, okay, I'm reading this and it's like, is this really including my child in this conversation? So I think that even though we have that, I think we still need to add that part. That's a missing factor that I am not comfortable doing without it, because with, like I said, the climate today, it's so much going on that I just don't want these kids to feel like their voices are not being heard at this point. So that is my comment on that. And also I have one more comment, and I know I love the fact that you're on here. I worry about my nonverbal students. What kind of counseling are they getting? Are we catching them when they're depressed? So I would like, as a committee or as a recommendation, that we do something around that too, because it is different for the nonverbal students, because I have had parents come out to me and they have a lot of times that they're depressed, but no one sees it because it's always passed over because they can't speak. So I'm asking the committee, I'm asking everyone, I would like to know if there's is there any direct education or direct counseling around our nonverbal students? Because that really does, their voices are the ones we definitely can't hear. So I would love to make sure that their voices are heard, even if they don't have voices, that they can speak verbally. So those are my two, and I'll let my other board members ask questions, but those are the two things that I want to put in on there. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Member Hodge, and I think, this is why we're here, and this is why we have such a great and unique board, and to provide all these different perspectives that are essential to representing everyone. So thank you. All right, Member Montero, would you like to, or would you like to allow? Okay, Member James.
Thank you so much. I I've been looking forward to this meeting and seeing the outcome of all this work. So thank you to all the committee members, and thank you so much to Board Member Montero for your leadership. I really appreciate a lot in here, especially about staff mental health. That's going to be really important to follow up on. And with that, there are other things we're looking at to properly implement. I'd love to see future conversations about how, for example, we're going to increase community and family involvement. Thinking of engagement, like making sure we're engaging our families that do not speak English as their first language, making sure we have vibrant translations, communications, ways for them to feel like they can reach our district. And working with the sister districts, I'm very excited about, because I know by the time kids get to middle school, that stigma is there, and we are at the point in the high school district where we're working to, like Board Member Montero said, to destigmatize. So if we can really work together to align that with our elementary school districts, that would be amazing. As far as training as well, we're looking at what this committee did with this incredible group of people, and we have this awesome product. So when we're looking at staff training, that's going to be so important. I've been through so many staff trainings, and how they are presented is vital. And when we're looking at presenting on suicide prevention, how we present that to our staff is going to make or break it. And I hope that when we're looking at these trainings, that we're really talking to families and to staff members to make sure that what we're presenting to them is taken to heart by the staff, that it's seen as relevant, because we are right there with our kids, we're there with the students. And I have been through suicide prevention trainings that were like literally presented to me, hey, you have extra time right now, you should just go ahead and get this done. And I've had students that I've referred to counselors because they're suicidal. And when that happened, when I was presented with that training that way, that just shows a huge problem. And I don't see that happening in our district, but I want to ensure that happens. And I think that consulting with families and teachers and staff members to make sure those trainings are as strong as possible will be vital. So there's a lot of parts of this that are going to have that follow through, and I think this structure of committees and brainstorming together is going to be how those things are effectively done. So I'd love to see how we plan on following up on some of these particulars.
Thank you so much, Member James. Vice President Barraza.
First off, thank you for a wonderful presentation and for all the hard work throughout this where are we in? June, so for the whole year, essentially, so up to this point. It's very important work, what you all are doing. It's a foundational step into opening up a philosophical change in terms of education and the way we approach our schools, and that's a big deal. So I really feel that you all should be very proud of yourselves for all the hard work. This is the first step that you're going to see spring into a lot of different programs and ways that are going to help students and staff. And so, congratulations, hats off to all of you, first off. I just want to kind of know a little more about the conversation pieces, how you guys formulated. So maybe, Montero, you can kind of give just a little bit of a background. I do have some more questions, but if you just give a brief, maybe the philosophical mindset. I know you guys already ran over it in the presentation, but maybe if you can give us just a little extra in, like the conversation aspect. I think it'd be great for us to understand.
Yeah, absolutely, Vice President Barraza. So, I think specifically looking at existing policies is where we started, and why I wanted to bring such a diverse committee to be able to review this, to have the students, the teachers, and really the diverse group that we have here to bring in the different perspectives to say, what are we currently doing now and what can we do better? And so I think that's really where we come out with JLB and being able to bring in all these different perspectives into the policy that we need, and being able to have a lot of really in-depth discussion, both from a professional standpoint, from a personal standpoint, on what our teachers and our students, our staff, and community members really experience. And how we can put that into policy. I think there's a lot, even that the district has been doing and continues to do on social emotional wellness, specifically with our multi-tiered system of support. But being able to put that into policy, I think, will be a huge step, to really catapult this forward. Beyond that, if you have any specific questions.
Is a committee still formulated, or has it been dissolved? I'm just curious in terms
Yeah,
of...
so in JLB, we're going to be having a standing social emotional wellness committee that's going to be working specifically with Mr. McDonald and Mr. Denny. It won't be an ad hoc committee specifically like this, but more of a committee that'll be able to get feedback from, to bring changes forward or get feedback on anything that's going forward, as well as making sure, in the policy that we're going to be having at least once every academic year, but I know Mr. McDonald wants to do it once every academic semester, to have that committee come forward and give an update to the governing board, as well as any needed changes or just general updates from there.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and for the extra work of continuing the conversation. That is an important aspect. And if we can write into the regulation maybe some data gathering aspects of it, so that way it's just written into it, so we don't, I think it just provide that clarity too, just so we know what we're doing year to year is more or less in terms of how many we're reaching, how many are we continuing. I know we already do that. If we could just write into this language for regulation at some point.
And just for clarification, additional clarification, that we started the Social Emotional Wellness Committee about 3 years ago, Lori, wasn't it? Or something around that, 3, 4? 4. And then we a lot of this was discussed at that time, but there was there was just a lot of directions. And so this is extraordinarily helpful in providing focus and priority. And so, the Social Emotional Wellness Committee, I'm assuming or making some assumptions that many of these good individuals out in the audience are going to be part of that, continuing on. And so we'll look forward to resuming that committee with some more focused work. So.
Thank you so much. And I just, I'm not sure if a committee member or Member Montero would like to help clarify, but I wanted to touch on those with medical conditions or certain types of disabilities. If we can expand on what is incorporated in certain types versus all-inclusive, and I just, for informational purpose and also for everyone else to understand as well.
Yeah, we can look at that as well. That was one of the discussions that we had with Mr. McDonald. Being able to make sure that we're identifying and recognizing the unique circumstances or challenges that a lot of our students are facing, and the challenge that comes with, making sure that we're not excluding anything. And so I'd be happy to work with you and Mr. McDonald on making sure that we can wordsmith that around before our second reading.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Dr. Menville? Anything you would like to add?
No, I thank you. I've added a lot prior to this, so.
Member Hutch?
Yeah. My question is for the standing committee. Can we be proactive, like when there's a scenario, like it's going to hit the students, like say we hear something happen with immigration and it's going to affect our DACA students. Can we be proactive to start reaching out ahead of time and maybe get some post-check, instead of always having to be reactive, be proactive on scenarios that we see already gonna bring problems in the community. Anytime that someone is, Black Lives Matter, when a person is shot by the police, can we start proactively talking about that? When the situation like with the Asian community, when they were, can we start proactively being prepared, with not just with our students, with our staff too, so they can start talking about it. I think that the part of social emotional is because we're always behind the curve when it comes to it, because we're always reacting to a scenario instead of proactive. Like, I remember when I got on the board, one of the first people I sat down with was Lori Warnock, because I wanted to talk to her proactively on how Mitch affected. I wanted to get to know him proactively so I can get ahead of it. When I'm looking at social emotional, I'm looking at these suicides, I have a face and a name to it. So I just want to know if we can start being like that, more proactive instead of always having to be reactive. A thing that President Garcia said, our disability community is probably the one that gets hit the most in our LGBTQ, because sometimes we just sometimes, especially with disability, we overlook it. You know, it's like sometimes we, not in a negative way, but we overlook it like their problem isn't emotional, it's always physical, or it's something to do because of their disability. We don't realize that they can be just depressed just like everybody else. And I get that because I've talked to the disability parents and they have that feeling. So that's what I'm saying. Can we be proactive with all of our different structures of our students? We have homeless. We have Mulligan's Matter. How many of us have been to Mulligan's Matter, our LGBTQ group home? I'm on the board. I mean, should we not be talking to them? They have more problems and more social emotional needs that are not being met, and they're in our district. These are our students. So I'm just saying we need to, as a board, as a district, as parents, students, teachers, we all need to be more proactive. I think that we need to reach out and start looking at things, and especially with what's happening in our society. So that's my question. It was a long-winded question, but it's been on my heart and mind for a long time, that I think that I'm just so tired of being behind the curve on all these scenarios that's happening. We need to be above it, and we need to figure out together how to be it. I know we can't always react. We can't always be above, but we can start to say, oh my God, this is a scenario that's gonna affect us. Let's figure out how we can get this information to our counselors so we can get it to our students, so we can get it to our families ahead of time instead of waiting for something to affect one of our students in our community. And that's one thing that Board Member Otero told us me a long time ago. He goes, I'm just so tired, Ms. Hodge, of us being, you guys react after it all happens. Our kids we're suffering now. So I just want to see if there's anything we can do as a district to try to be more proactive. Long-winded, sorry, but that's what I want to get to.
Well, I can also turn it over to Mr. Denny if you have anything to add. But I think, that's a very good point, and what we tried to really emphasize in making sure that in additions to JL and JLB is the proactive side. And, because you are right, we do have a lot in place on how we react to certain situations. But when it comes to, social emotional learning, community education, and instituting that and kind of integrating that into our curriculum as well. Yes. And recognizing the unique needs that all of our students have is something we put a lot of emphasis in on this policy, and I know we'll make sure we'll follow throughout.
Thank you.
And then if I may add, I do want to recognize and applaud Dr. Mandeville for being proactive, for example, in the events surrounding the trial, and preparing our community, our students, and our families to understand that this is something that will impact our students in one way or the other, right? And so having that forethought and that proactiveness to recognize that, I think, speaks volumes about the culture that continues to grow, and how we're being very cognizant of all of our students and our community members.
Thank you, President Garcia. And I want to make just another comment on that, because that's a fine line that as educators, as the superintendent, as executive team members, and quite frankly, principals and teachers have to take in addressing the whether they're regional, whether they're within our state, whether they're national, whether they're federal issues, whether they're social issues, whether they're there's so much that happens so quickly because of social media and how information is shared, how misinformation is shared. And so I understand where you're coming from, Board Member Hodge, in terms of not being reactionary. I think we have done, I think, as best we can, so I'm sounding a little defensive, but that in responding appropriately to the factual information, because we have to gather factual information. Where is the need actually coming from? Is this real? Is this not an issue for any of our schools? So I just want those who are listening and in the audience today just understand that is a very, very difficult task that we learn every day and every week to improve upon and strengthen, and that we rely on a solid, very competent community relations department that tracks information all the time. And quite frankly, we rely on you as board members, and because we're all a team, and so we can better navigate these messages together because we share information. I do, and I appreciate that. But also, when we talk about the professional development piece for our teachers, they're just as much, if not more important sometimes, in ascertaining the impact within their classrooms and what they're hearing and seeing and experiencing with their students. And so we have to empower them to feel comfortable and confident to share information to their department leads, to their principals, call me, email me, and that happens at times. So I want to just respond, and that is a very, very difficult task to try to get it right all the time. And anyway, I want to say that it's just something we take very seriously, and I don't want to have an impression that we have only been reactionary, because we have not.
No, that's not what I mean, and I want to explain what I meant by that. I'm going to go back on that. I'm going to tell you, it's not about just being reactionary like that. I'm saying if we know something's already in this, and we don't have to prove it, it's already in the news, why can't we address it before it gets to our kids? Like, especially what happened with the Asian community. Why, this is something we can address. We can proactively bring that out, even if it's just information, or bring the hotline back out if you need to speak. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that we have to be ready to do everything, or we're going to have a post check on everything. I'm just saying we can be proactive on scenarios that may or may not affect our students, like situations like what you did with George Floyd. With what happened in Florida with the Asian community, have something written out saying if you feel affected by this, you can reach out to this number. Even if we have to do it over and over again, at least we can pull those kids. And that's what I mean by that. I'm not saying that we're going to be Superman out here trying to pick up everything that happens. I'm just saying we can be, and it's just not just our district, in the community, we could just be proactive to things that are already happening, situations that we know that occurred, and we can proactively, address it with our students and our teachers, just like how we did with the George Floyd scenario. That's all I'm saying in that general. I'm not saying that, no, I'm not saying you got to TikTok everything on Facebook and Twitter and find out, but I'm just saying when there's a big scenario that is going to affect our community, like how you did before, why can't we be more proactive to get that Team Lifeline back out and say, hey, if you need to speak, or you need to talk about it, or you have feelings about it, this is the number, just to bring it back out to our students and staff again. That's what I mean by that, by being proactive.
Thank you so much, Member Hodge, and I think this is why all of this is so important, because we will continue growing, we will continue to improve in our own culture and our own dynamics, and making sure that all of our students do feel like they are heard and they are mattered, and that they matter, and that we meet them where they are, because ultimately that's key. So thank you so much. Are there any other board members that have any comments or questions? Yeah, Member James?
Yes, just a quick question. How would a big policy like this be sent out to staff, and what training goes behind such a big policy adoption? Because I don't know that as an educator, I've necessarily been aware of policy changes in my district, you know, and I don't know if I've ever been in a district where there has been something that is this impactful that has been added or, you know, revised in a district that I've been in. So I'm curious as an educator, when something like this happens, that has, again, so many components that do affect educators, how do we roll that out to our community?
Thank you. Member James. I'm going back to in Mesa. So you were there, and so when we made changes, when policies were made by legal counsel, we sent them out to all users. So I don't know, it's been 10 years since I've been there, so maybe that hasn't happened. So when we have a policy in Tempe Union like this, it's so pivotal, it's so big, it's so good. There's a lot of things that we're already doing within the policy, but this streamlines our process with the MTSS, focuses on suicide prevention. All the meat and potatoes of this, we will have to, once this is approved formally, not only will we have this out for, it's be approved by the ASBA as well, not approved, but they will publish it. We will send this out to our all users, because everyone needs to have a part in this, not just our teachers. But then we're going to have to be very targeted and specific with the professional development, which would be the next phases in the next coming weeks, how we're going to phase that through some of the additional days that we approved for our staff to get that out. And this is going to be kind of an all year long kind of thing as we grow and learn with this and do better by our students and one another in engaging with our students more honestly and authentically, because that's really the goal in making a difference across the board in terms of student outcomes.
Vice President Peraza.
Just more of a comment and regarding just building off of what you just mentioned. If we can have maybe positively a study session or a presentation on your part as the implementation as we go on, so that way we can all kind of have clarity on the communication aspect and no confusion as we move forward. And if we can include a funding aspect to the presentation, see what we're going to need. This obviously, anything will require some form of capital. So if not an additional capital, but where is it currently coming from for the programs that we're currently implementing in response to the new policy? Just so that way we make sure that we understand, you know, all the aspects of it is really what I'm looking at. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Hodge.
I just wanted, I know that we're talking about having like the, you know, the committee meet quarterly or semester. Is there any way that maybe we can do like a newsletter that can go out that everybody can get information on? I don't know if that's already been talked about, but I would love to have that.
Yes, we plan on actually being more than quarterly, probably monthly, and then we'll report out to you. We'd like to do it every semester, and then you'll see a monthly newsletter go out not only to our employees, but also to our parents and families.
That ideal, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Any additional comments or questions? Vice President Braza?
Just that we've focused primarily on policy JLB, just referring to students. If we can look into staff wellness and being in the future and write up policies pertaining to what would be effective for them. It's not only do they have their own personal situations that they have to live through for good or worse, but there's also the weight of picking up the students' stories. You know, you hear students throughout the day in your classrooms and what they're dealing with, and that's a constant continuation from school day to school day, week to week, semester to semester. You're trying to track these students, and they become a part of your life, which can be stressful, especially with some of the stories I've heard. So I imagine that can be compounded in the eyes of staff and them taking that type of work home with them. So if we can look onto extending these policies down the road, I think that would be greatly beneficial and well-rounded in terms of what we're trying to do with social emotional wellness. That's all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vice President Barraza. I wholeheartedly agree. Our teachers have and staff have been through a lot this past year, and not only that, but before the pandemic, and certainly after that, they will need to be supported in their mental health and wellness support as well. So thank you, thank you. All right, at this time, if there are no other, Member Montero, I'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah, just want to close it out and first address Vice President Barraza's point. That is something that we're definitely going to take a look at throughout the rest of the summer. I know Mr. McDonald and Mr. Denny have also expressed interest in doing that and even looking at a separate policy specific to staff wellness. So that's something that we're definitely going to take a look at. And just to wrap things up, I do also just want to say thank you again to all of our committee members, those that are here and those that aren't here. So if we could give them one more round of applause for all their work. Yeah. You guys put in a lot of commitment and hard work into the policies. You know, this is a process we started back in March, drafting up a resolution to make this a reality. And to have this come forward today, like Ms. Hodge said, I remember probably, I think over 2 years now, was my first time standing up at that podium to bring forward a lot of the struggles that we as students face, especially through a pandemic. As a student right now, it was an incredibly tough year, and I think now more than ever, we need to be able to have the difficult conversations and to really, and what I'm most proud about is really taking the proactive side of things and with the community education to reduce the stigma and to just build a positive school environment for all of our staff and all of our students will make a tremendous difference. Even just talking to some staff currently, just this process with the committee and the conversations we're having now have already started to make a difference and to start conversations, despite, even before any of the policy that we're bringing forward or any of the changes, which is huge. And it was an honor to be able to chair this committee, and, it means a lot to me, as someone who went through a lot of struggles my freshman and sophomore year of high school and losing a friend my sophomore year. And part of the reason why I'm so passionate about bringing some of these changes forward and really, spending the time with Mr. McDonald to look at, what across the state do we have, and really recognizing that what we're doing here is unprecedented, and can really, be some of the most comprehensive mental health school district policy we have in the state, and to bring this forward and to really show our commitment to the whole student. And making sure that we're focusing on all of the needs of our students is huge. And before I wrap up, I know she's going to hate me for this, but I want to give a huge thank you to June Reppy. I can't express how much gratitude I have for you. All of the drafts that we went through. Yeah, let's give her a round of applause. The countless hours of going through several drafts to make just what we presented final policy, I can't thank you enough. And with that, that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Member Montero, and thank you so much, June, for all of your work every single day. At this time, that concludes the Social Emotional Wellness Ad Hoc Committee Study Session Report. And we will continue on with the student engagement piece of the study session. Dr. Mendeville.
Thank you, President Garcia, Vice President Barraza, members of the board, those in the audience and listening out there, our executive team members. We're going to present the information on the Student Engagement Initiative, our student engagement attendance. And I want to frame this a little bit because this is partially in response to the budget that was recommended by the recommended by the Budget Advisory Committee, which I accepted and presented to you 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you approved. And we talked about ADM recovery stipends. And while the ADM recovery and the name and how we go about it was the piece that was uncertain at that time, and we all knew that. So there's a roadmap that we're going to try to define here, and I'm actually kind of excited about this because it really hones in on the work that we all should be doing, not just teachers, not just, I mean, everybody, our bus drivers, our food nutrition folks, our principals, everybody has a role in making sure that our students are engaged, that they feel welcomed when they come into our buildings, onto our property, and because that's what's going to happen when we have that culture of acceptance, a culture of welcome. Our kids are going to come to school, and that will increase our overall attendance. And I think everything happens naturally with that. Part of an engagement and attendance is partly making connections with our students. Well, how do you connect with students? You need to, talk to them. You see them in your classrooms. You connect. And so this student engagement initiative is, I think, very thoughtfully designed, and much of the work that actually started in April with Megan Sterling, our Executive Director for Community Relations, and Dr. Wilson, our Associate Superintendent, but also others who assisted with this, our principals. And so this is going to outline some of the criteria that we will be implementing with our teachers and staff and everybody, so that we all can realize a monetary benefit in terms of for our engaging our students and families even more so, and learning how to do that well at each of our school sites. Okay? It's all yours. Dr. Wilson.
Thank you, Dr. Mendeville. President Garcia, Vice President Barraza, members of the governing board, executive team, and those at home. I see our guests have left at this point. I was good. Anyway, I'm excited to be here this evening to present alongside executive team member Megan Sterling and talk about our student engagement initiative. As Dr. Mendeville said, some of this which you will hear today are things that have been ongoing and they have started, and then these are the things that we plan to continue into next year. But before we get started, I kind of want to take you back so you can have some context, because it's not as though in education we haven't had struggles, but you will remember, and for us, March 13th is a key date that I think we will all remember, because that was the point in spring break where we had to come back into work, and we sat in the executive conference room and we had to plan out messaging our families because this pandemic had really hit. And Dr. Mendeville and I had been on calls with school district leaders around the state, and everyone just in sequence was closing school and not going to return for in-person learning. And so at that point, that was our first big pivot, unexpected pivot. We have so many things in this big binder that Mr. McDonald has of all these natural disasters and things that can happen. Nothing in there about a health pandemic. So everyone across the nation and even the world, this was a huge curveball to education. In October of 2020, USA Today reported that, so now that was March, then in October, they reported that in the state of Arizona, there were around 50,000 students who were missing, right, unaccounted for, vanished from Arizona's public, district, and charter system. And even on a national level, the country, even now we've done a full year in this, steep declines in attendance, learning loss, failures, and declines in enrollment. So I share all of that to just say, we're all in this in education. We had our struggles or our challenges even before, but this really threw, as we were progressing, especially in Tempe Union, we were very excited of the trajectory that we were on, the growth we were seeing, and then this curveball impacted us in a way that we just couldn't prepare for and predict. And so today, when we talk about engagement, this is really about how do we, now as we start to picture and we hope for our new normal, how do we connect with families, reconnect with students? How do we build these lasting relationships? and establish this trust with our community? And how do we just engage families all in a way making them know that school is a place of care, it's a culture of care, it's a place where we want them to be. And the most important reason for that is that we're all invested in the success of our students. So, this is where we started thinking about how do we recover this. Now, again, we'll talk a little bit more about the work that was ongoing as we look at last year, but as we get ready to go into the 21-22 school year, it's really looking at now, how do we really pay attention to our average daily membership? Some of these are things I'm going to say that I know Ms. Muehlmans has done a wonderful job of explaining, and often she and Roland Carranza are like the go-tos and explain a lot with me, as well as some of our IT folks that do the auditing and the uploading to the state. But we thought about 3 goals that were important, and we learned this in different discussions that came out of budget advisory and their hearing on campus's lack of understanding, and then just us knowing that there are those of us who know about average daily membership, but we also know that there are many within our schools that don't understand what that means. And so when we say take attendance, or when we're saying, talking about coming to school, what does that really mean? So first, we want to establish a shared understanding of what average daily membership is across all employee groups, because that's important for everyone to understand what that is and why it's important. The second goal is to increase student attendance for the first 10 days of school. So in the first 10 days, that is when you establish the average daily membership to get the full 1.0 funding for each student. And so basically that's kind of the grace period of the state. So you want everyone to start, for us it'll be August 2nd. We want everyone to know that school starts August 2nd, right? Despite what you hear about any other district or college, we start August 2nd. And so that's really crucial. Now, that is crucial for ADM, but again, most important, that is crucial to stay on top of learning, to be successful, to be connected, to be a part of your classroom communities, get involved with school and just be successful. We know when students miss, that there begins that disconnect, we fall behind, we lose confidence, and some of these things that we heard mentioned in the committee report earlier. And then the third thing is to really look to increase the 100th day ADM, average daily membership, for Tempe Union High School District. Another thing that's important to know about those first 10 days is that the state requires us, for anyone who does not show, so we will have students who we call pre-enrolled. Those would be our incoming 9th graders or anyone that's moved into our area and has enrolled and hasn't started with us, and then our continuing students. But anyone in that group who's enrolled with us, they don't show, after the 10th day, we have to drop them out, okay? And so then that means, so we'll talk about some of the things to make sure that all of those folks report and they show up for us. So this committee will have 2 purposes. We're going to start with the assembling of the district committee, which is in motion as we speak. I have names, so I have parents, I have staff, I have student names. They're coming in, and by actually tomorrow, I will have them for every single school. So much like the committee you just saw assembled, it will be very similar. So we'll have representatives from all of our stakeholder groups. So when we talk about the district committee, I'm very aware that it's summer. I want to be respectful of time. That work is going to really be about gearing up for August 2nd. So for all of our pre-enrolled, for all of our continuing students, so that they understand that is our start date. We want you here. We want you on campus. We want you back. We want you enjoying things. We want you involved and engaged. So that's what that's going to be about. And I know in a little bit we'll talk about what Megan and the community relations team has done in talking with different students and staff groups. But then also she will be a part of working with our students, their campaigns, and we've already seen a lot of wonderful things that are out there that we can jump in on. Then what the district committee is going to do next is establish some essential work and baseline expectations for August 2nd and beyond. So within this group, you're going to have people who, like I said, this is work we already did, so I'll throw a group out there. Our dropout prevention coordinators, these are people, their whole focus is attendance. Many of them are already using reward systems, they're doing things, but in some cases they may have a couple of people, they may check in with a teacher. This is going to be a really collective effort among everyone in supporting this work. But like they will be, we've talked about this, and Stacy White has been wonderful and worked with me, and she works with that group. They will be the data collectors of this group. So there's all this rich data that our district has available, and so they'll have a piece of roll of data they'll be pulling weekly. We will have others and things that we'll be running. We may be doing push notifications for teachers, reminders, just all kinds of little things that will be the baseline data. It's important to note that the district committee will determine that. So you'll kind of hear me reference, like it is what I have ideas or things that we think, but it'll also be in collaboration with what they come together and say, this is the work that we all agree we're going to pull at the sites. Then that group will then go to the sites and they will establish a site committee. And in that work, it's going to be running those baseline expectations and looking at the data, but it's also going to be focused really on the school's ADM and attendance. And so they're going to do the essential work, but they're also going to use targeted strategies based on the needs of their campus. So this won't be a surprise to you. We may find that there is one campus where first period attendance is a real challenge and tons of absences. So they may do some targeted work and strategies for that. You may find on another campus, it's after lunch. You know, upperclassmen aren't coming back or something like that. So that's the targeted work. We may also have campuses where there are health issues. We know that students that have, health issues, and how do we work to support those families and put, strategies, interventions, and supports in place to work with them. So while we know there is work for the greater good, there is also targeted work that goes, because all of our campuses have things that are similar and things we need to focus on, but they also have some unique strengths and some unique challenges. And so we want it to be flexible to work based on the needs that they have. And so now when we start to talk a little bit about the timeline, I'll reference a little bit of the work that started in the spring. And part of it is you would get from me regularly to see how we were really focusing on our students who were struggling academically and how we were tracking that with our administrators on a weekly basis and putting in strategies to support them. In this case, our schools worked with plans to enroll or re-enroll and reach out to, we call students, W1s and W4s are things, this is really your front office folks in the language that they use, but W4s mean I withdrew from school and I am nowhere in the system in the state of Arizona. That's a W4. So what we saw our schools doing, they were running those things. They were going out and doing home visits. They were texting. They were calling. Some of us even went on some of those home visits with schools and tried to meet with families and see if we could work out for them to do the on-site learning, if that was the case in that moment, and just really kind of reconnect them and get to the root of what is the issue with the disconnect, whether they weren't kind of logging into Google Meets or if they just weren't coming and didn't want to receive the on-site learning. And we also saw some creative things that emerged from the schools. Some of them had different campaigns that they did to re-engage students. Marcos Deniza is one school I will highlight. They did a whole cameras on initiative, and they had students and they had an administrator really do this positive messaging around putting the cameras on and why we want it on, and they put it in a way that was positive and about connecting, not in a punitive way. And the students and the teachers really responded to that. And out of that, they were doing surprise pizza visits. So it was like, I'm leaving math class. Oh, wait, the doorbell's ringing. And it's like, oh, it's Mr. Fleming. And it's, it's my teacher. Oh, my gosh, I got a pizza, And then from that, what we heard from the Marcos Deniza administration was teachers started putting in different incentives. And this really, really took off. If only we had kind of known this at the beginning of the school year and we saw some of the videos and things that they did, but it was really great and they got into it. Teaching and learning worked on giving more professional development to teachers to engage students in a virtual setting. This was a new setting for many of our teachers, so it was definitely a shift for them. And so we had different things that we put in place to help them do different engaging activities. And then Megan Sterling and the community relations team started to do some student and staff focus groups, and they learned a lot of information, which she will share in a little bit. When we look into this summer, this is some of the work that I just discussed. We are going to assemble the committee. We'll probably have around 4 meetings or so. We'll see what we can work out, but we'll have students ramp up probably some type of social media or other ideas to engage students and build some culture there before they even come and rally around August 2nd. And then we're also going to start to set what are those baseline expectations of the work that we're going to do during the school year, and just really ramp up. And I'm sure we'll even find, what can our board members do, right? To just get everyone excited about and coming to school on August 2nd and establishing that membership with Tempe Union, being ready to go, feeling successful, getting supported, and becoming a part of our community where we really are there to kind of, just put our arms around them, and make them feel special and know that we want them to be successful. Then August 2nd and beyond, that's fall 2021, this is where people from the committee and others will really educate everyone and their staff. We have PD days before we get started, so we're going to educate everyone on ADM. At the sites, we're going to really talk about class period attendance. I know for years I didn't really understand what that was about, and probably not until I was an administrator to understand why, if I forgot to mark attendance, why that was so problematic and an issue, not just for the student individually and what's on the student's record, but also in how we report that up to the state. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about chronic absenteeism. We're going to talk about when you become an excessive absence, which would be 5 absences in a quarter. We're going to talk about the role of how they're going to communicate regularly with their staff and give them data updates, and then work with their staff in ways to come up with different strategies to support students. And you'll see some of those ideas later of things that we will share, and we have information to share with the community. And I think the big thing to remind everybody, they play a role in helping students stay on campus. Everybody has a role in this. If you're the receptionist, you're greeting, you're making people feel welcome. If you're in counseling department, you're there to help and provide resources and be a guide or help facilitate a plan. If you're in the classroom, you establish a positive culture. You're letting students know you want them to be successful. If you're an administrator, you're supporting and putting the conditions in to support that type of culture. And if you're a principal, you're looking at all of it and finding those ways and just looking for ways to celebrate the great things that are going on, and then how do you come together and pull people in to come up with strategies to improve things. And so everyone will have a role in this. Everyone can feel that they have contributed to the work because they can, and research has shown that they can. So when we look at the baseline expectations, and again, you'll see the little asterisk at the end, actual implementation may vary by site because it will really depend on the work of the committee. But some of the anticipated things that we think will be are things that we do know that happen. So monitoring daily class period attendance, do we do push notifications? Some schools do that, some do not. Some have a little chime, a nice little chime reminder for everyone to take attendance. Weekly, pulling the data, analyzing it, looking for things to celebrate, looking for areas to target. What are trends that you're seeing? Is it by class period? Is it by subgroup? Is it by certain things? Sharing different ideas. And then monthly, really many of the schools have monthly staff meetings, incorporating this as part of the discussion, giving everyone access to the information, students included, and then how do we celebrate these things? But again, everyone has access to the information. What gets measured gets done, gets accomplished. And so it's all hands on deck, and everyone will have a shared understanding around this. As needed, we'll really talk about an intervention class, or plan. So you've heard about multi-tiered system of support, and then you actually just heard from our Social Emotional Wellness Committee. They talked about tiers. Attendance has tiers as well, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But then also just how do you, in the tier 1, which is focus on everyone, how do we recognize? And part of the things that research says is not just acknowledging and recognizing those who have the perfect attendance or they missed one day, but it's also for those students who made huge gains and improvements in their attendance, right? If I had 5 absences, but then in quarter 2, I went to none, those types of things. How do we build that type of recognition as well? And we'll talk about different ideas and things that schools can do based on things that we read. So those are some of the things that the schools will do. So now I'm going to hand it over to Megan Sterling to talk about the focus groups and some of the information that she and her team learned as they went out and met with students and then some of the staff across all the sites.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. So as the work began in spring, it became more and more apparent to us that it was going to be very important that we had the feedback of the people that were going to be affected. So our students, our teachers, those at the sites. My team, along with some people from teaching and learning, were charged with holding these focus groups to find out more information on attitudes around attendance, how things went last year, what people were thinking. I want to acknowledge my team. we started this, I guess it was like a week and a half leading up to graduation where we just started going out and having these focus groups. So as you know, there's nothing that goes on in the week before graduation. It wasn't like we were busy. So my schedule didn't allow me to attend everything, but Warren Cole really took the lead, and then the rest of my team. Nellie Mullins is here tonight, Kelly Gardner, and Diane Welling. And then we also worked closely with Stacy White in teaching and learning. So a really great group of folks to get out and speak with these people. We had focus sessions that were held virtually with the teacher groups. So that was the district teacher think tank, the district academic interventionists, and then the district dropout prevention coordinators. And then we also went in person to a wide variety of different classrooms, different subjects, core classes, electives. So between those two different groups, we were able to get representation and feedback from all of our 6 traditional schools. So next slide, thank you. So some of what we learned would be what you would probably expect, but there were other things that really surprised us. And when we came back and we looked at the data and we analyzed it, we really found 4 key areas where we were getting feedback and where there were items of importance to people. So engagement and rapport, positive relationships really make a difference for people, both on the teacher side and the student side. Everybody wants, positive environments. Mental health, so that feeds into mental health. Lots of mental health issues, whether brought on by COVID or before, that people were concerned about. And so it became more and more obvious, and obviously the work that we're doing now reflects that, that we really need that support system and that awareness of mental health resources. Social relational, seeing your friends, getting to know people, being involved in activities, all of those things were very important and had a really high impact on students' overall well-being. And then instructional strategies. Students were voicing that they enjoyed being engaged in class, they enjoyed being able to work one-on-one with their teacher and get feedback in that way, and having hands-on interactive projects or work. So, sorry, kind of a busy slide, but there was a lot to distill down. So I wouldn't say that we had any big oppositions, between students and teachers, but certainly they had different points of view, right? So students were voicing things like they have other demands on their time, family obligations or work obligations, lack of reliable transportation. Students felt that teachers were disengaged. And the flip side of that is that teachers felt like students weren't engaged. And I think that, some of the big takeaways there is the pandemic really affected everyone. So students are worried about their teachers, teachers are worried about their students. You know, everybody had a difficult year. And so that was kind of reflected there. Students want that interaction. They want to be called by their name. They want their teacher to ask them about their basketball game last Thursday. They want to know that their teachers care about them. And then again, getting back to that social emotional wellness piece, students voiced to us that they were suffering from a lack of motivation, and they definitely felt that they had increased, you know, anxiety and other issues like that. So in the end, sometimes it was just as easy for them to not go to school as it was to go to school. So those were some of the things that we were hearing about attendance. Teachers, on the other hand, you know, again, there wasn't anything that was truly oppositional, but they voiced the importance of social emotional learning strategies, you know, knowing that that would have a big impact on the overall well-being of students. And they wanted to provide that support to encourage kids to attend school and to be engaged and be involved in activities. So we have that overlap piece there where there were a lot of commonalities, and they were saying the same things essentially. So there's that mental health component. You know, both teachers and students are worried about the ongoing effects of COVID, about their personal health, about the health of their families, their loved ones. There's concerns around learning loss or learning gaps. And then just in general, how will next year look? You know, there's a lot of anxiety around that. You know, we're walking into a new normal or maybe getting back to normal, but what is it really going to look like, and how will it impact students and teachers? I think if we look into the examples that were given to us, you know, there's some really easy wins and easy ways that we can encourage engagement and encourage attendance. And so, of course, that's what a lot of the work here is going to be. An example that really sticks out in my mind is we were talking to a group of students, and a student raised her hand and told us that she was so moved and so excited because her teacher had called her mom to tell her that she did well on a test. So it was simple. It was like probably a 3-minute phone call, and you could tell, I mean, this girl was just lit up. She was beaming, and you could tell that that made her feel engaged and connected, and it was a really nice positive example of the things that can be done. So next slide.
So we did a lot of digging into student attendance and what research says, and there's a lot out there. I mean, if you searched it, you'll see a lot. Did I go? I went one too far. So I talked about this tiered system, and this is just a brief piece, but it's very similar to the tiers you heard with Social Emotional Wellness Committee and what you are already familiar with the MTSS process. And so attendance, same. Tier 1, positive things you're focusing on everyone, right? Tier 2, we're starting to hit some of those. These are early interventions that we jump in. So these may be small groups of students. It's targeted work. Tier 3, your excessive absences. This is where you're really working with students and families and trying to see what's at the root. I think when we start looking at a lot of these things, what is the root cause of this, and how can you target that and support that, whether that's providing families with resources or things that we have in the school to help support a family. So this is just a quick summary from one source when we talk about effective prevention strategies, that they talk about establishing an attendance team. Well, when you look at the committees that we're gonna have something that rolls in, that's going to be similar. Setting some attendance goals. We have some goals set naturally through some things, but we'll set some from district, and then we picture sites setting goals for themselves and, you know, really checking their progress. Surveying students for reasons of absenteeism. So again, this gets to root cause. What is this really about? Are these some issues at home? Are these some issues at school? Are these some issues around learning? It could be a range, as you all well know. develop a culture of attendance. And what's important to note about this, when we say a culture of attendance, positive, a positive culture around attendance. I think far too often, and where schools or district miss it, is when we become punitive about everything. You missed 5 days, you've done, that's not motivating. And that's where I think sometimes we see a bigger disconnect and they don't want to come back. But when students know we care and we value them and we're invested in them being successful, that's when we can see them reconnect back and come back into the school community. And then targeted communication. Communication is an area we can, is as good as we can be and as great as some schools are, we can always be better. I think that's going to be the great work of these site committees, to know their community and what are going to be the best ways. And that's where I think you'll see some differences there, just based on community. And then when we look at interventions, student-school connections, family-school connections, breakfast, lunch programs, you know, ways that we can support.
Sorry. So Dr. Wilson mentioned briefly, but there's a lot of attendance, or a lot of research that tells us that regular attendance has really significant outcomes. And so we found this, I don't think we mentioned it yet, we found this great kind of think tank called Attendance Works. It's attendanceworks.org. I would encourage you to check it out. They have all kinds of great resources, a ton of research. So that was a really a great thing for us. So students who are attending regularly tend to do better on tests. And students who do better on tests tend to do better overall academically. So some of the stuff is, okay, that's very logical. And if you're experiencing higher levels of academic success, you're more likely to graduate from high school, you're more likely to attend college, and not only attend college, but graduate college. So some of that is very kind of obvious, but that's what research tells us. And in terms of the social emotional outcomes, maybe not quite as obvious, but students who are attending school regularly have higher skill levels in some really critical areas. So the four that this particular study called out were self-management, growth mindset, self-efficacy, and social awareness. So some really key things, you know, to be able to function and move around in the world, I think. So very interesting just how everything has a very big snowball effect, you know, thinking about attendance and then all of these amazing things that can really come out of it.
And you heard Megan mention Attendance Works, and this is where I picture, just as staff, you say, okay, well, how do I help? Well, that's what's super cool, is that they list like almost every position within a school and tell you. Now, obviously for the sake of time and for you all here today, I kind of teased out 3 different groups, but talking about teachers, positive, you keep hearing this, positivity, right? Relationships, positive notes, you heard about the call home. First in line privileges, whether that's lunch or, you know, priority line, like you're the VIP to go into the football game or a dance or something like that. School supplies as incentives, and I think they talk about those with having like school logo, you know, something there that would be cool. Team certificates for the best record, competitions, things like that. They talked about teachers having an attendance wall. Again, not a shaming thing. This is a positivity thing. You're recognizing, you're acknowledging, and then chance to act as a teacher's assistant, or there's someone who's helping you. We look at school leaders, recognition. So how do we draw attention now to attendance in the way that we have with other areas in rewards and recognition? Certificates, rewards, pizza parties we saw with the example with Marcos, and we saw some of the videos of those things, and they really love that with the deliveries. Donated products. I know some of the schools already do this. The dropout prevention coordinators will recognize, you know what, you went from 7 absences this quarter to 2. I'm so proud of you. You met the goal. And so here, you're going to the movies, you know, or here's a Dutch Bro car, you know, that kind of thing. So those things, traveling trophies, grade level competitions, T-shirts, buttons, priority parking, I mean, you name it. Again, this will be a lot of what comes out. We really want to, this to be organic and come from the schools and what are things that they think, but obviously we're going to give them information so they can get ideas. And then when we look at families, because there's a role that families can play as well in making school attendance a priority, you know, really helping your teenager maintain a daily routine, and talking about sleep. We know when we talk about high school students, the video games, there's things, you know, and now with cell phones, you can be up all night. It's not like back in the day, some of us who are older, where you didn't have this device or these devices that could keep you up and really you're exhausted. So how do you establish routine? Understanding a school's attendance policy, checking in, going into Synergy under Parent View and checking those things out, or just communicating. You know, again, meeting families where they are. How do you communicate with them, check in, reward them, and then just stay in communication. But again, we want to partner. We want to partner with families because we're invested in them. But again, not shown on here, but things they talk about, counselors and helping to establish plans and things like that. And then also with your committee, how do you have little intervention teams? So you're trying to prevent as many students from getting to 3, you know, level 3 as you can. And that level 3 should hopefully be very small, and the intense targeted work can take place. But we are really excited to start this work. Like I said, there are pockets of this. It happens. There are people in roles that do it. But now the importance around collective responsibility, collective action, to really help our families reconnect with Tempe Union. So that is it, unless you all have any questions.
First of all, thank you so much for your presentation and for giving us substantive information and the importance of regular attendance and engagement. And props to you for sharing attendanceworks.org. I'm already deep in it. Y'all get me with data. And I'm sure that board members have questions and ready to go. So I will start that process. Board members who would like to go first? Y'all didn't push your buttons. Member James.
All right. So thank you for this. It's nice to see this roadmap, as Dr. Mendeville described it, kind of coming together. So this is kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about the stipend, the ADM stipend we were presented during the budget, correct? Correct. Okay. Correct. Because, yeah, I think when it was presented initially, it kind of felt like, okay, we're pushing forward and here's a new job, and that roadmap wasn't clear. So this clarification is really, really helpful. And that said, though, that stipend being made available to staff in, like, what, June of 22? That feels really far away. And for our staff that worked so hard throughout this pandemic, we know we're gonna have to hustle this year. Every single educator out there in every role, we know we have bigger responsibilities this year than ever before. So I'm wondering, I know we've done a lot for our staff, especially classified, and I think that's something that we should be really proud of, fast forwarding that movement for them in the salaries. I'm wondering, with this stipend, if there's a way that we can allocate at least a portion of that stipend to come sooner, just to be able to take a breath and say thank you to our staff. Maybe not that full amount, that $1,500 goal, but that there's a portion that we can say, here, we know you earned this. Like, you did more than we ever expected we'd have to ask of you. Okay. And here's a simple thank you as a breath to take before we say, and here's our next job. Because I think this is exciting. As an educator, it's like, yeah, I kind of want to geek out on ADM, and like, what can I do, you know, as an educator in my new role in Tempe Elementary, you know, and I'm an orchestra teacher. I hope that I get to motivate these kids to come to school and be there and play. I know that's part of what I do. But I think that as an act of goodwill, if we have it in the budget, that we can give that portion, that it's going to impact how the staff feels about this and how they're incentivized to say, yeah, all right, let's jump in and do this. I think that that's important because I don't want to diminish what we've already done. I mean, I look at this budget and it's amazing, looking at the step movement that has happened and the stipends for the longevity folks. Like, there's so much, and I don't want that to be discounted because it's incredible. And so, but that's just my thought about how this stipend rolls out. And then my final thought is that I get really hesitant about attendance awards. I know there's a lot of research, you don't want to push that perfect attendance. And I love the idea of the improvement, that focus on improvement, because the perfect attendance awards can often be damaging. And I didn't hear anything about perfect attendance in there, but just kind of really making sure we're directing that, especially as we're talking about mental health and wanting students to know that, mental health days are important to staff. Your mental health is important, and taking a mental health day is valued and it's okay. So how do we kind of balance those things? And really just being cautious about our vocabulary around those attendance incentives. So, but yeah, thank you so much. This was really, really cool.
Thank you so much, Member James. All right, I apologize. I have not been keeping track of the buttons. This is new that we're all up here. Member Montero. Thank you, Member Hunt.
I'm not used to this yet. Well, thank you guys for the presentation. I actually am really excited about this, and I had a couple of questions, but I also just wanted to say, like, I was really happy to see this shift to this positive light around attendance. A shift away from more the punitive way that attendance kind of has been. I think of several instances back when I was a student. I think even more specifically, one comes to mind where I was out sick first week back from spring or winter break or whatever. And I get called into the attendance office, and it's more of, why were you gone? Do you know the consequences for what happens if you miss X amount of days? And, I think shifting that focus to setting those goals, asking why you were gone, how can we support you? I think that'll be a huge shift in getting students to even, to want to come in the first place. And I think the questions I had related to the stipend, I think Member James brought up, so I just want to quickly echo what she brought up. And then my question specific to attendance is, I know we focus a lot on just that attendance piece specifically of getting the numbers up and the students there in the classroom, but what does that look like engagement-wise for what do those goals look like for once the student's there? Because I think a lot of the times if we hyper-focus on just the attendance, like the students might be there, but they might not be engaged. And so kind of what does that look like to get those students engaged as well?
Board Member Montero, I'm so glad you asked that. So teaching and learning, that will be the teaching and learning portion, and the work has begun definitely with that, with instructional strategies and to re-engage and reconnect. Also, I loved what you said about your experience, because I think part of what also needs to happen is when we sit down with any student, it's not judgment. We seek to understand. We can't draw conclusions. And that's where we can lose, well, not just a young person, you could lose me that way, but I need you to first seek to understand what's going on with me, connect with me, and then let's map this out. And even if I am misguided, even if I am not the most positive in all of that, how do we just keep trying? We have to stay invested in the work of connecting, because I have seen at the building level when you're at a school where it might be quarter 3 or 4, but you finally connect. And there are some successes there. And I know our dropout prevention coordinators from all of the schools could tell you about some of those, because I've had them run to me when I was principal and oh my goodness, we finally got it and we reached this goal. And so, yes, there will be those that it happens right away and they're impacted by those positive things. And then there are gonna be those that have challenges. We gotta keep meeting them where they are. They're young folks, they're developing, and we just have to keep trying all of these different strategies. And like you all have seen, President Garcia is seeing some of the wonderful things in attendance works, and then there's a lot of other research or evidence-based strategies, like some of the things you all shared earlier, that really give us guides. We learned in looking at this, there's not a lot we have to create on our own. It's there. It's more about what's going to be the best fit. And as the district committee, we definitely want to be looking at certain things together because we think that's important for us to look at, but we also respect and honor the differences in culture and dynamic at our different sites. And it just will be there. And so how do we allow them that flexibility in some of that work? And then sharing, because I know this happened when we were principals or even assistant principals, like, oh, they're doing this. Hey, did you hear about what, let's go over there and ask them, or let's go see this. Or what we saw with the tutoring program, which will now next year be a big district-wide piece. So I think the letting people try things and test them out and then sharing these ideas, there's no telling where we can go.
I want to just add to that because I'm always impressed with teaching and learning, and actually you've got practitioners here as former principals and admin, and the ideas that are generated about increasing the capacity of their toolboxes. As teachers, that's what we say. We have got a toolbox, and you've got to continually add to it. But the only way that's going to make a difference, not even talking about ADM, talking more about what the previous study session was all about, making connections with students, engage with them, get to know them. Because if we can do that interpersonal piece with our students and do that with sincerity, authenticity, with care, this is all going to fall in place naturally. I wholeheartedly believe that. It will take care of many of the other challenges that balloon when we don't do that. They continue to grow and it perseverates. And that's the part where in the multi-tiered system of support, we want to put that MTSS structure out of work, quite frankly. And so I go back to, I'm impressed with what our teaching and learning and all of the team does, but in making that toolbox more and more valid and real and relevant to what we need for today for our students. It just needs to be opened, and we need to apply it. And when I say we, I mean our teachers, our educators, our food nutrition. Everyone has a role, including me. And so anyway, I just think I need to say it because we continually build capacity in terms of resources, but if we don't act on them and set goals and do something with that toolbox of gems, there's lots of gems of ideas, we're not going to make that difference. Okay, off my soapbox.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manuel. Member Hodge.
First off, I want to say thank you for the presentation. It was phenomenal. It's been something we needed to do. I wanted to go back to something that Board Member James says. It's just a thought process that she hit it on the nose. I love the idea about celebrating, but when I was in grade school, this is when I was going to come back to him, when we would do the perfect attendance or we did the attendance award, when I didn't get it, it tore my heart out, and then I wouldn't try anymore because I just felt I was never going to be able to get it because I was a sickly kid and I just wasn't going to get the award. So we have to make sure we find a cautious way of not making it because it's already programming these kids because the perfect attendance awards is still part of the school system in the grade school. So maybe we need to partner with, if we're going to do something like that, maybe partner with our elementary school families to make sure, our districts, to make sure that we, kind of give them what we're doing and just give them that because that is a big effect. And a lot of it goes all the way up, why it trickles into high school. Because by the time you get there, you're like, I'm not going to get this award. I'm going to make it to get that. I'm at 8 or 9, so I'm okay as long as I don't get to that number. So I think that we need to, this is some of the things we need to partner with our two partner elementary schools to make sure that maybe we can give them what we're in line with and maybe they can get kind of on line with it too because it does go back to that social emotional part. It's already impacted in there. That's my part of that. Go ahead.
I just want to say now you're citing research that you'll see in Attendance Works, which talks about The early intervention starts in elementary, so you're absolutely right. This is where you establish a pattern. What I also want to say is we don't have to focus, and I know you heard me say perfect and improved, but this can also be in ways that we recognize academics.
Yeah.
You know, it could be your 3.5 to 4.0. So no one needs to know that necessarily you are the perfect attendance person, but you could be, and that's great. But I think we can categorize things, and we can look at levels of improvement, and that's some of the exciting work that I think our committee will come up with, because I am sure those are feelings and things that they want. We want these to be attainable things, and we want groups of students to be recognized, and it's those who improve the pattern of behavior, and it's those that already have the established, you know, high patterns of behavior.
Okay, and I have one other question or a suggestion. I know that I did hear what the student said about the good grades. That really impact me. As growing up, when your teachers call, either it's a good thing or a bad thing. You're either going to get in trouble, or you feel like you can get in trouble, or you're getting praised. So I was just wondering, is there any way that maybe we can do like a voice record over for our teachers, that they can actually just hit it and say, this is one of the kids, to say, thank you for being in class today. You've been in our, you know, even when we were doing it as kids, just that positive reassurance, or, you know, even with tests or something to help out. Because I know teachers have so much on their plate, and for them to have to call and they have 5 or 6 classes, is there something that we can help them with that? Or even have maybe other staff members that can come in and help with giving positive reinstruction for the families or community, you know, something that, you know how you get that call like, your child wasn't in class today, that call, but we can have something on the opposite end and say, thank you, your child was in class all week today, on the opposite end of it, like a positive note to it.
Board Member Hodge, yes, we can share that as an idea, absolutely. I do want to share some good things that triggered something, a good memory, is that I know we've already started, and I know Nellie, who's here tonight, has already revamped some of these attendance letters to make them more user-friendly and doing it that way. So absolutely.
That's it, thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Hutch. Vice President Barraza?
Thank you for all the hard work and presentation. It's very thorough. There's a lot going on, and I really, first off, like the targeted approach. You know, nothing's cookie cutter, so, you know, there's going to be different issues with each community in terms of what the attendance issues are, as well as just kind of classes. And I like the idea of just seeing what each school needs as a particular, as opposed to a particular blanket. I really don't have too much in terms of, you know, the ADM. I think it's important, and I think these are great programs to do. I just think, you know, this year, we haven't heard much about how it affects the stipend, considering that it's kind of attached to ADM this year. And so for me, I guess, I studied with, when I was in prison, actually, one of the courses I took for betterment was a course in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Great book, great mindset, and I still follow it to this day. And one of them is, one of the steps is begin with the end in mind. So I see, you know, we have the attendance wall, the classroom, the recognition, traveling trophy, pizza parties. And I ask myself, what is that going to do? What does that do? Ultimately, it makes us feel valued, important. And it helps us to be motivated and be part of the community. I think that stipend, not attached to ADM, can do that now. I think if we just give the stipend, it will do the same as saying you're valued. You know, we don't need a trophy, we don't need a name on a wall, we don't need a pizza party. We need to just let everyone know that they're valued now. And I know that's difficult when we talk about the budget, but I really feel this is a detrimental situation that we're not looking at, because what if we don't hit the ADM numbers? Are we really going to not give them the full stipend? Are we really going to do that? And who else? That means we're saying they didn't live up. Who else didn't live up? Are there individuals hired particularly to look at attendance? Because then they would essentially be at fault as well. So what does this mean? It's a very bad idea for me, in my opinion, to attach ADM to ADM goals to a stipend. I think if we're really looking at what we're trying to do, increase students' attendance, yes, the name on the wall, all that stuff, good. Pizza parties for students, school supply incentives. hugs, maybe not physical, but emotional ways we can tell students that they matter, like what Board Member Hodge was saying about that phone call, and what you all said about that phone call. That's what made a difference to me growing up, was as a teen parent, someone reaching out and saying, hey, you know, get to class, this is gonna help you. That's what mattered to me. So I worry, you know, about all the programs to get us just to that step with the end in mind of saying we need to revitalize, energize, and build that next step. And I personally would gamble on the fact that I think if we provided half that stipend now and then half attached to the performance, I think we would get the ADM we want. I think we need the morale boost. We need the energy right now. And I just think when we look at the school year, it's going to be shaky. Some people are really dead set on what this means. And all they hear is, I'm forced to go and find students to get my stipend. And while that's not the case, and I will tell them all the time, that is not the case. That's what's being said. So I worry about that tone. But I do love all of this going on, and that's the only problem I have with it, is just the attachment of the stipend. But I just wanted to make sure that I said that and put that out so people understand where I feel we're coming from and what may result in terms of the morale in the future. That's all I have. But I appreciate everyone's hard work. And no, it's not a go grab students to get paid situation, but that is the tone. That's the tone, and it's spreading, and it's community-based. It's not just our staff. So that's how I feel about it. I think we need a morale boost, and we need them to know that they should feel important, absent the trophy, stipend, say we need your help. We need students now, please help. And I guarantee you every one of those teachers are gonna step up because that's what they do every day. So that's all, thank you.
No, thank you so much, Vice President Barraza. And, you know, to add on both you and Member Hodge, Member Montero and Member James, I think collectively there's been pieces that we've all talked about with respect to this. And by that I mean, for example, the Member Hodge's mentioning of the Perfect Attendance Award, you know, very, very similar for me, or even with Ames testing when that was back. You know, the designations on your, and the certificates that you'd get, and, you know, tuition being covered. If you didn't meet those goals, you weren't going to continue them, right? And I think what, both with respect to the ADM and stipend and the student engagement piece, not creating presenting something that it's an incentive that I think is phenomenal, but has the opposite effect, I guess. Because what we're really trying to do is obviously get everyone together. So I think all of you make really good points on that as well. I will come back to that. I'll end on that specific topic, but when Member Hodge was talking about, you know, these different ways to engage positively with our families and our students, I wholeheartedly agree. And then what made me think back was to my 8th grade teacher, Mindy, you had all given me happy grams. So I'm not sure if we can bring those back. Because those were really, I think, great with the Jolly Rancher. But I think at the, you know, at its core, those were really helpful because it wasn't something that was shown, you know, to the rest of the class or that something happened, but it was more, you know, one-to-one personal. Here, I'm recognizing you individually, rather than, you know, a public, which I think is also value. You know, each student is different and will have those different approaches. But that was just one of the things that came to mind for that. But and another thing too with like the phone calls, I have pause when anything's automatic, because especially when it's interacting with students and it's not authentic, because students will see right through it. And so, I'm not saying that we do that, but I know that that's something that when Member Montero and I met with our own focus group months and months ago, that was one of the main things that they had brought up, is that they just want authenticity from us, right? And so being cognizant of that. On a separate note, I wanted to get your insights on the relationship between truancy, our state law requirements, and the chronic absences, and how scary that sounds, and how might impact our students and their families when they're seeing, their chronic absences. Now the judgment that we're talking about, that we're trying to recreate this culture, right? That might kind of disincentivize them from even continuing, saying, well, I'm already on this path. What can I do different at this point? So I guess any insights or thoughts around that relationship between those pieces?
I think no matter if it's truancy, which truancy means unexcused absence, ditching. That's the language the kids ditching, right? Chronic means excused, but you're missing 5 or more per quarter, or excessive, I believe, is the way that reports out. I know research kind of talks about chronic, but in talking with Diane, they call it excessive. I think no matter what it is, it's a conversation where a person you're respecting, they have dignity in the midst of it. You're seeking to understand what the situation is. And I think on our campuses where we have staff who are in these roles and that's how they're handling it, and you're right, students recognize someone who is genuine and sincere, they are authentic, they care, they know, they will respond with their truth. And you meet them where they are with that truth, and it's putting a plan together. So I know we've talked a little bit about the truancy piece. Mr. McDonald and I were talking about that a little bit. I know we're really moving out of a lot of things. I think the 90s work in education was very zero tolerance, and we're done. And, there was a time for that, and now it's shifted. And we're starting to make those shift in a lot of areas. And I think as your time here on our governing board, you're going to see a lot of things shift in ways that are more effective. I do want to share this one thing because it gets to the heart of what Board Member Hodge, Board Member Montero, and then President Garcia, what you just said. It's very simple. I know we listed ideas here. It doesn't have to be pizza party. It doesn't have to be name on the wall. It doesn't have to be big public. It's our students, and these guys know it because I heard it from them. It's very simple. I need you to know my name. I know you have 150, I know you have 130 students. I know as an administrator you have 2,000. I need you to know my name. Take interest in me. Ask me how my weekend is. If I'm looking sad, ask me a question. The students have articulate, it's not, we can do some of these things, and that is great, and we've seen it work, and those can be some things, but really the core of the work is building a relationship, and that's how you do it, right? And so this doesn't have to be complicated. So if families are coming into the front office, hello, Mr. Garcia, how are you? How's it going? How's your brother? How do you connect and learn? And so we have some people who do that well. We have some people who struggle and they need those strategies like that, and that's where we want to give that. Everyone's strength is not connecting, and I get it because I have things that are not my strength, and so those are the areas where you want strategy, so you know you can be a part of the success that's going to happen with the student and with the school.
Yeah.
So may I comment on a few things? And I just want to make it real clear that I mentioned that roadmap, and so the roadmap includes how we disperse those dollars. But we need to be mindful of the Budget Advisory Committee's recommendations in terms of funding for everybody, because I don't want the perception, and those are the details that we will navigate through in the coming days and weeks of that if we disperse partial stipend to our certified staff, and we don't do the same with the classified staff, it's going to create division. And I think we've done a fairly decent job of trying to unite. We need to do more work, all the employee groups around this, So there's that element that we have to factor in and consider, because the funds are available for our teachers through the Classroom Site Fund. It's the funds for any of the, and I wanted to get away from the ADM recovery, even though that's what the board approved. The dollar amounts are not changing. How we go about operating that and dispersing that is well within our roles in the operational side. So it doesn't change the budget at all, okay? But we can certainly navigate some discussion and talk about how that could be incorporated sooner rather than later, because I mean, I happen to agree, you know, we're being logical and looking at the 100th day that doesn't fall until like the second or third week of January. There's current funding reconciliation that happens 3 times in the year. And so there's all those critical detail pieces in terms of the funding. But all your points we're taking, they're duly noted. So I want you to know that we're going to work out a plan where we can disperse these funds, because we're going to do this no matter what. This whole, and I'm so glad that we're all on the same page with this, because the engagement piece, the making connections, you know, 3 years ago, I gave out a book, a simple little book of 180 connections with our students. And I could feel the eyes rolling in the audience for my teachers, because they're going, oh, he's got that elementary background. And I've said this before, you know, they're kids in bigger bodies. And so, and I know I have some elementary friends on this board right now. And so I think all these principles and these great ideas are what our elementary friends and districts, sister districts, I know are incorporating. And we just need to bring them up to the level for our bigger kids in high school. But Vice President Barraza, you've got very good points. Our focus is with the attendance and the engagement. And if we do that well, the ADM happens naturally. Getting kids taken care of for interventions with their learning struggles will happen naturally. The social emotional wellness, there'll be far more attention quicker, sooner, and naturally. If we focus on exactly what Dr. Wilson mentioned, what are we doing in terms of best practices of being good stewards to this very noble profession we call education? And that is, when we have families come to our door, regardless of their zip code, how are we welcoming them into our home, the 6 homes that we have, into the district office? What are we doing to say, we want you here? You know, have some water. You know, hey, take a seat. Hey, what, you know, all those very, very simple interpersonal, relational connections that we can make immediately, simply, that doesn't cost us a cent. And if we do those and practice those naturally, all those other things that we've talked about today will happen naturally. And that is the goal. I know it's the goal of the board. And I do believe that our teachers will rise to that occasion, because they always do. But we are going to do this because this is the right work. It's planned, it's organized, it makes sense. It gets to the heart of the culture of what we're trying to do in this district. And all our students matter. All of our students matter. And so we will navigate through some of the details of that so that we honor the requests of the board, okay?
No, thank you so much, Dr. Vanderbilt. I think it's incredibly important that we do that, as we've all felt and gone through such a rough time, and I think this would be a very significant boost for everyone after such an exhausting time. So thank you so much for that. Because I like to, I won't take too much time, but because I like to dig into details, with Board Member Hodges' comment, again, circling back on the perfect attendance awarded, for example. how are we evaluating, I guess, the root causes of, why couldn't that student make it? Why couldn't that student get to class? And evaluating, was it a transportation issue? Was it because they had to drive their sibling to class or to school at a different location? Was it because something's going on at home that they're not getting sufficient food or not getting sufficient sleep, or they're stressed over their exams or GPA that now they're falling asleep in class and now they're not learning in class, or they're getting there late. All these additional root causes that we know are external factors, and obviously we can't control everything, but at least finding ways to cushion and support and help amplify some of those root causes that we're able to kind of say, we know what's going on, and this is exactly what you've been talking about, Dr. Wilson, and Megan, certainly with meeting them when they are. I love that so much because I think that's one of the best way to distill it in how we approach it. But I guess really honing in on those challenges and I guess not being afraid to tackle them too.
Absolutely. And I think what likely is the case now is that the burden is on the MTSS teams. I think the work we're about to do is more will be at that level 1 baseline support day to day, and have strategies that they can do. But I will tell you, I've seen some amazing things in this district and had calls come in that, family just lost their home, they can't find another place to get in, and I called one of the best family liaisons in the district, and we worked and got them set up. So we have some amazing, amazing staff that are connected to wonderful resources. We have schools that have food, things. We've got families that have left domestic situations and come into our schools and they support them with clothing. And I mean, we've got some amazing things, some of them through partnerships with the city of Tempe, and then just amazing staff that they get out there and they find out where all those resources are. And then how do we get those folks to kind of teach and connect others across all of the schools so we don't have to go to the one where we know this person who has all of the resources. So I think the collective focus is just going to prevent more from falling through the cracks. Because I think we have some doing that now, and again, because it's probably overwhelming for the 3 to 4 on a campus, and then yes, but if everyone knows the role that they can play, I think we can prevent some of those students from falling through or getting behind, where we can get them on track quicker.
No, thank you so much, and I think, too, with what Dr. Mendenville said, with education being a noble profession, obviously there are issues with the state formula, which is a whole separate conversation. But I think doing what we can with what we have and really empowering our teachers and our staff with what we can do as early as we can, because it obviously not just teachers, but all of our staff, because everyone has had a hand in getting through the finish line and prepping for this next coming year for everyone to be successful. So yeah, no, thank you all so much. Are there any additional questions or thoughts before we recess for a bit, before moving to the official special meeting portion of the agenda? No? All right. Dr. Mendo, anything else? All right. Well, at this time, we will adjourn for 10 minutes, and we'll return at 7:40 p.m. Thank you so much. right, welcome back. We're reconvening this meeting at 7:40 p.m. We will continue with D Board policies with the first one for first reading, Policy JL, Local Wellness Policy. And I'll pass it over to Member Montero.
Thank you, Mr. President. So most of this we already went over during the study session and the report from the Social Emotional Wellness Committee. But the changes to JL, there is not much. We're just making some minor clarifications and wording changes, adding in specific stuff towards social emotional wellness and mental health, shifting around some of the paragraphs to make the policy read a little bit better, and adding that section on suicide prevention, which also is similar to what we have in JLB. But not much on JL, but I'd be happy to answer any questions on it.
Board members, any questions, thoughts, or comments on Policy JL, Local Wellness Policy for first reading? Hearing none, seeing none. All right, we will move on to our second, Policy JLB, Student Mental Health and Social Emotional Wellness for first reading. Member Montero.
Thank you. Yeah, so we as a committee decided to create a separate JLB policy specific to student mental health and social emotional wellness. We thought it deserved its own standalone policy, to kind of give specific direction to what we're going to do there, and also add on to the regular, specifics with the regulation with the MTSS piece. Again, most of this we went over and got feedback on during the study session. The first part outlining some of those specific goals for sites, and the suicide prevention piece, kind of giving that baseline structure for all of our schools on how to follow, specifically with the prevention piece and the proactive piece, but also the postvention and reaction piece as well. And lastly, with the MTSS piece, setting way to give the specifics which do come with the regulation, and making sure that with the Standing Social Emotional Wellness Committee that will work closely with Mr. Denny, give regular updates to the governing board. But again, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, board members, any thoughts, comments, or questions on Policy JLB, Student Mental Health and Social Emotional Wellness for first read? Member Hodge.
Okay, I just, as I said in the study session, I would like for you guys to add in there the part about the minorities, like all of that piece that I said about, like, when we talk about the part about, I forget what part it was. It was the...
I think it was the staff development.
Yes, the staff development, adding in just making sure it's including all students. So I was saying like the Asian population, the Hispanic population, the African American. So saying maybe even just saying minority or whatever it takes to word that in there to make sure everybody is included. That's all I have on it.
Thank you so much, Member Hodge. Let's see, Vice President Barraza.
Yes, really quick, if we could go to slide, it's a little down, slide 6. Oh, I believe it's slide 6, at least that's what I have it on as mine. It would be the section titled Postvention, subsection F, Develop Memorial Plans. It's more of just a language that's contradictory to current ARS and US code. It states avoid planned on-campus physical memorials, funeral service, tributes, or flying the flag at half-staff. We don't have the authority to be able to authorize a flag at half-staff or not to prevent...
I'm trying for him to get it.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay, so it's right there, policy F. Avoid planned on-campus memorials, funeral services, tributes, or flying the flag at half-staff. Half-staff's actually governed by Title IV U.S. Code, Section 7, in terms of position and manner of a flag. It's very highly regulated on when a flag goes into half-staff for memorial purposes, excuse me. So the president and only the governor can order flags at half-staff, and so I think just the language just entitled that is contradictory to the laws, as well as our inability to enforce or even just put a flag at half-staff if we wish to. We don't have the ability, let alone to send troops to war.
Vice President Barraza, you have a good eye. That's exactly correct. I don't I remember making a note of this a while back, and I lost sight of it, so thank you for bringing it back to our attention. I think we can reword that in an appropriate manner that actually allows us to do what we typically would do, because there are a lot of there's a lot of sensitivity around memorial plans and being overt at the school site that need to be taken into consideration. So can we look at that and maybe reword that? But that's
yeah, and I respect the sentiment, and I agree with the sentiment in terms of that. There should not be planned. You know, there's reason behind it. It's just more or less a flag. Flying a half staff, we don't have that ability at all. And in fact, putting this into a policy can put us in a position
maybe
of lawsuit.
Maybe that first 2 or 3 lines or so would be stricken, and we'll just reword it.
That's the only thing I have in terms of the language. I think this is a great policy. Mondo, please convey to the committee again our thanks. And I think it's a great roadmap for our philosophical way of approaching education in the future. Again, thank you. Thank everyone, you know, that was involved. That's all I have.
Great, thanks so much, Vice President Barraza. Member James?
Yeah, just to go back to what Board Member Hodge was talking about, because you were mentioning you never know, are Black students being affected by something like a George Floyd incident. We don't know when those events are going to come up or which group might be more traumatized. So I'm wondering if it would be sufficient to have a broad statement of any student group that might, and I don't have the wording in me right now, but you know, a student group that might be more affected by social world events, something, because I felt like that's what we were really getting at, was we just never really know what other groups might be affected by something, and to have a broader language might be more inclusive of, you know, of setting that tone of.
And those are both excellent points, because I got that from what you were saying, Board Member Hodge, and you're just reiterating that. Because we'll look at language, because there are ways in which that language is appropriate to encompass all. And so we'll look to see what best fits with that language. Because, I mean, while I'd like to recognize everybody, we're going to miss some.
Exactly. That's what I was trying. That's what I was trying to get to.
When we talk about all students and all youth, we really mean all. But we will find the appropriate language and make those edits.
Yeah, because I think that what President Garcia was talking about with the reasoning, the really deep reasoning between having the American Indian and Alaska Native students in there because of the tribal communications, just having that thoughtfulness behind everything that we have like that, so that that intent is there. And I think that that would hopefully cover your valid concerns.
I think so too. I wasn't trying to diminish one to get to the other, but I just want to make sure that when we read it, that all of our kids feel that they're included if they have that scenario, or even if they're not. I don't even want to take away from our Caucasian kids, because that really takes away from them too. So they're saying, what, we don't have a problem because I'm not minority? Or I just wanted to make sure that all students are included.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Member James. And then I will wrap up with echoing, do you want Vice President Barraza?
Just really quick in terms of that, I do appreciate what you mentioned in terms of the historical perspective and why it's significant. If there's any way we can word it in to encompass everything we're talking about here, you know, all students, as well as some way of acknowledging if that is possible. But that would be my recommendation, is trying to figure out, put the two in, because I think that historical perspective would look really great in our policies and reflective of what Board Member James was saying, that there is an element of, you know, profoundness to why it's in there.
Well, and to your point, Vice President Barraza, that there are particular groups that have been identified historically that are most at risk. And I think that was the intention within that being specified in the language. But to your point, Board Member Hodge and Member James, if we can find the language, and I think we're all savvy enough, we'll get it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you all so much. I think this is why I'm really proud of our board, because we're able to really build off of each other and collaborate and find ways to make sure everything is covered. And, you know, just I wholeheartedly agree with, you know, all these recommendations. I always am mindful of, as Dr. Menderville has said, historically, groups and populations of individuals who have historically been left out, including disability communities who, there's a reason why we say and recognize them in similar way. And, when we're talking about LGBTQ, and queer, and explicitly identifying and supporting trans students, because even though they're part of the larger LGBTQ community, it tends to get left out, right? And so there's significance in ensuring that it is identified and shared in that manner, but also in a way that recognizes everyone's and all of our students' needs and impacts, quite frankly, because over the past year, with all the various events across the country and locally, we've all responded to them differently. And I'm grateful that I've been able to rely on, quite frankly, everyone in this room and beyond to really make sure that we're all taking care of each other. So that is all I have. Any additional comments, thoughts, questions? All right. Well, then at this time, we will move on to closing the meeting. I'll move to end this special meeting. May I have a second?
A second.
Thank you so much, Member Hodge. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much, everyone. Meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting is June 16th.